Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I'm going to talk you through all the books that I received in the month of April. Some of these were orders that I set back in March that finally arrived. Some of these were new purchases that I just couldn't resist. We all know how that goes. And a couple were very generous gifts, so let me talk you through them. The first was a gift from my family this Easter, and that was Tea with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson. This is a non-fiction book all about tea during the Regency era, how it was bought and sold, how it was prepared, how it traveled, anything you can possibly want to know about tea. Now, I am a big fan of tea myself, although due to my new allergies, I had to stop drinking it for a while, but I am hoping to get back into it soon. And I love Jane Austen, so what's not to love? Now, strangely, Goodreads tells me that I read this book in 2017, but I have no memory of that. So I will hopefully be reading it again very soon, certainly during Jane Austen July, if not before, so I will let you know what I think of it this time. The next two that were also gifts were very, very kindly sent to me by my friend Jonathan. The first is a book that we both read last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember. And it is Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. And this is the story of Aisha, who is a substitute teacher living in a Pakistani Muslim community in Canada, and trying to find her way in the world, as most people in their 20s are. We can all identify with that. And she is trying to resist the idea of an arranged marriage, and all of her family are despairing of her, until she meets Khalid, who is seemingly her match, except for the fact that she finds him very conservative and very judgmental, and sparks fly from there. This may sound like your standard modern-day rom-com, but it is in fact a Pride and Prejudice retelling. And I loved everything that they did with the characters. It's a really wonderful retelling, very creative, but it also stands up on its own as its own story. And I was thrilled that he finally got me my own copy. Thank you so much. But I soon found out why he bought me my own copy, because the second book by Uzma Jalaluddin, which is not a sequel to Aisha at Last as far as I know, but is a similar type of contemporary book, just came out this month. And so when that order arrived, I finally put two and two together. So this second book is called Hana Carries On, which I don't know much about, and I'm kind of enjoying that. It's about Hana Khan, who I believe has a podcast of some sort and is still living within the Muslim community in Canada. I believe it's still a Pakistani Muslim community, though I'm not sure. And despite the fact that Hana Khan has a podcast, the novel circles around her finding her voice and standing up for her community in the face of failing business and attacks and hate crimes. And all of Uzma's books are just so hopeful and beautiful, no matter what happens to the characters, that I'm really, really pleased to have this. And I can't wait to read it very soon. Next, we come to some orders that I placed in March. The first is Islands of Mercy by Rose Tremaine, which I also don't know very much about, except for the fact that it takes place in Bath during the Victorian era. So slightly later than the Regency era, but nonetheless, I love Bath. It's my second home ever since I studied abroad there, so I am very excited to go back in the form of a reading trip. The next book I ordered is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, which in this case is a dual volume, as it also has The Voyage Out in it, which I know nothing about. Apparently it is another of Virginia Woolf's novels. I mainly ordered this edition for A Room of One's Own, as I have heard nothing but wonderful things about it, and that it's much easier to read than Virginia Woolf's novels, which I have read a fair few of, but I always find them very mysterious when I feel like they shouldn't be that dense. But nonetheless, I'm hoping for better luck with her nonfiction. It is, of course, a feminist classic as well, arguing that women should have their own space in order to be creative. And this edition is really kind of wonderful. It's from a company called Bookishly, I believe. I will link their website down below. But they hand create these covers. They hire a variety of artists to create these covers. But they are over, very nicely with French flaps and everything, they are over just your standard Wordsworth paperback editions. So you get custom artwork, but they're very affordable. And I love the way Wordsworth classics feel, the heft of them, the smell of them, the typeset. Is that weird of me? Come on, you're bookish people. You must know that that's not weird. So I'm very excited to get to this in due course. Next, I ordered The Sealed Letter by Emma Donoghue, which will make the 5th or 6th Emma Donoghue book that I own, and yet I haven't read any of them. So I will definitely be getting to hers over the summer, hopefully, so I can break that streak. But this just sounded so wonderful that I could not help but pick it up. This book takes place during the Victorian era, I believe, and is about two women, Helen and Fido, who are great friends, but Helen is unhappily married, and so Fido helps her carry on an affair with a young army officer. Soon after, though, their friendship is put to the test as they become embroiled in a court case where accusations of rape and adultery are flying, and the contents of a sealed letter could hold the key to it all. And it's apparently based on a real-life scandal that happened in 1864. I'm wondering if it was the Mrs. Robinson scandal. If you don't know about Mrs. Robinson, check out my video on wonderful feminist nonfiction. And there is a book, Mrs. Robinson's Disgrace, that will tell you all about that affair. It doesn't specifically name that affair, but it's sounding rather similar. So I don't know, perhaps it's linked. It may not be. But in any case, it still sounds like a wonderful story. So I may come to this sooner than some of the others. I don't know, I'll decide. Next, two other classics that I ordered in March. I am very excited to have in my hands now. The first is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Yes, I am going to attempt this monster of a novel, but honestly it sounds right up my street. And a few years ago on a plane, I was able to watch some of the latest television series of Vanity Fair, and I was really enjoying it, so I am looking forward to tackling the book. But the book is historical fiction. It was written later in the Victorian era, but it takes place during the Regency era and the Napoleonic Wars. And it follows Becky Sharp from the time she is a young teenager until she's much older, and everything that she goes through to try and claw her way into a better place in society. And she is smart. She breaks every rule in the book to achieve what she wants, and yet I have heard you still love her by the end of it. So I am very intrigued to see what I make of this novel for myself. The next book that I picked up, which I am equally excited for, is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I have been a big fan of the musical since I was 14, and I attempted to read the book then, but it didn't really jive with me. However, after hearing Emma talk about it on her channel Emmy, she raved about the way this was written, particularly the way they talk about music in this book. And now that I am actually an opera fan myself, I am very intrigued to see how they represent the opera world here. I feel like I almost don't need to go into the plot of this. I feel like most people know the plot of Phantom. But in brief, if you're not familiar, It's the story of Christine Daae, who's a young ballet dancer at it is the Paris Opera. They call it by a number of different names, who longs to be a singer, and one day it is discovered that she is a beautiful singer. And she is reunited with her childhood sweetheart, Raoul. Everything seems to be going swimmingly, except for the fact that she will never name her music teacher. He is simply the angel of music. No one else has ever seen him. And the fact that the theater is haunted. And the Phantom seems to be making his presence known more and more lately, seemingly to favor Christine. And it's about the love triangle and music and all the beautiful things that humans are capable of, but also all of the deep, dark things that humans are capable of. And I hope that I jive with it better this time. Plus, this cover is just stunning. Speaking of music, the next book I picked up I bought myself because I had to pick it up. And it is Working on a Song, the lyrics of Hadestown by Anais Mitchell. Hadestown is an incredible musical. It is one of my favorite musicals of all time. It won the Tony for Best Musical in 2019, and I was lucky enough to see it in previews before that. And it is stunning. It tells the story of Orpheus and Eurydice from Greek mythology, but it also entwines that with the story of Hades and Persephone, with Hermes acting as narrator. And that right there is beautiful, but it also then takes on topics such as industrialism, materialism, environmentalism, and is also a not so thinly veiled attack on the Trump administration. And all of that combined sounds like it shouldn't work, but it does. It is beautiful in its simplicity. And the poetry and the wordplay in her lyrics are on a par with Lin-Manuel Miranda's, I would have to say. And I've been wanting them for years to make a book about this musical, like they did for Hamilton and The Great Comet. And it turns out they did. So this is a book, it doesn't have many pictures, but it does include all of the lyrics to the show, so you can read this and listen along to the soundtrack and feel like you are in New York at the theater. Because like Great Comet and like Hamilton, nothing that happens on stage isn't included in the soundtrack. So you can listen straight through and get the same experience. So it includes all of those lyrics, but also the writing process from Anais Mitchell's perspective and all of the changes that happened to each of the songs depending on where they were, because the show has been in production for a long, long time, which is part of what makes it so special. The fact that these songs are so timely, and yet they were written over 10 or 15 years ago, some of them. So if you haven't seen or listened to Hadestown, I would highly recommend that you do, and indeed, check out this book by Anais Mitchell. I can't wait to read through the whole thing. Also, to give you an idea, Hadestown is told in a very folk music type way, with a little bit of jazz thrown in. It sounds like a very quiet play, but it is powerful. And the final book that I picked up this month was an order that, again, I placed in March, and it is La Mano de Fatima by Ildefonso Falcones, which is another monster of a book. Ildefonso Falcones does not write short novels. I loved his book La Reina Descalza, or The Barefoot Queen, years ago, and so I've been looking for one of his books ever since. And to not have this in a mass market paperback format, which would be truly massive, I had to order this from an independent bookstore in Spain. So it finally showed up, and I'm very excited for it. La Mano de Fatima is the hand of Fatima, which is that symbol, which you may have seen around. And I honestly don't know much about the plot. The title alone pulls me in. And to give you an idea of Ildefonso Falcones in general, I would describe him as the Ken Follett of Spain. He writes huge, sweeping historical epics that you just fly through. You get completely caught up in them. You care about all of the characters. And I have been looking to read some more of his epics ever since. The little bit that I do know about this novel is that it takes place in Córdoba, in the south of Spain, which is one of my favorite cities because it is known as the melting spot of Andalusia. Because for many years, it was home to a strong Jewish community. It was a Muslim stronghold during the Muslim rule of Spain for about 700 years. But Spanish Christians were also welcome in this city. And so those three religions really did mix and live in harmony for a long time. Until, of course, Ferdinand and Isabella tried to unite all of the Spanish kingdoms under one rule and one religion, which led to the Reconquista, or the Reconquest, in which the Muslim rulers were kicked out back to North Africa, and shortly after, the roots of the Inquisition were sown. So, while it has beautiful roots, I have a feeling some of those negative consequences are going to play into the plot of this book. But it takes place in Córdoba, and the small blurb on the back here says that it's the story of a young man trapped between two religions and two loves, in search of his liberty and that of his city in Andalusia in the 16th century. So yes, it would be right as, or right after, Ferdinand and Isabella have begun that reconquest. I also read The Barefoot Queen in English before I realized that it was translated from the Spanish. And indeed, I found out that next school year I'm going to be teaching some higher level Spanish classes. So I've been looking for ways to brush up on my higher level grammar and vocabulary. So I've been needing more Spanish books to read and programs to watch. I do indeed have 2 programs that I would like to watch, but this will make a wonderful addition to the Spanish books that I will be reading between now and September, once the new school year begins. So there you have it. Those were some wonderful books that I picked up this month. Let me know down below if you have loved any of these books. Don't tell me if you didn't like them. Let me form my own opinion, please. Or if you are equally excited or intrigued by any of the books that I mentioned, or any of the ancillary books that I mentioned. I always love hearing from you, but until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.